Please, Avneet. Thank you very much.
Good evening. A very warm welcome to our esteemed dignitary, Ms. Lajwanti Chatani ma'am, and all the participants to the 10 days online National Capacity Building Program on Legislative Drafting, Public Policy Making, and Legislative Analysis, jointly organized by Sambhav Initiative and Pro Bono India, where today's session is all about policy design, evaluation, legislative review, and impact assessment. I, Avneet Kaur, delegate of Sambhav Initiative, and today's moderator of this session. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Before I move forward, I would like to mention that the last few minutes of the session will be reserved for the question and answers. It is my privilege to introduce our esteemed dignitary, Professor Lajwanti Chatani ma'am. Ma'am is professor in political science at Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Vadodara, India. Professor Chatani is co-winner of the Forum on Contemporary Theory, an internationally recognized and acclaimed space for interdisciplinary academic exchange on issues of contemporary theoretical relevance. Ma'am held the positions of head of the Department of Political Science uh, and Vice Dean of the Faculty of Arts at the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda. Ma'am has also served as director of the Institute of Policy Research and International Studies. Professor Chatani is a core member of the MS Meridian International Center for Advanced Studies. Ma'am has edited a special issue of the Journal of Contemporary on revisiting the political. Ma'am has edited a special issue of Anikant on Gandhi and time binding. Ma'am is on the advisory board of several referred journals and has contributed to curriculum development and course materials pertaining to political theory. Ma'am has several publications to her credit. Professor Chatani's area of research includes political theory and thought, Western and Indian, justice, democracy, gender, and the nature of the political. We are deeply honored to have you with us today, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Avneet, for that very warm introduction. Let me begin by thanking particularly Jayant Bhai Agarwal for having me here today. This is indeed a pleasure to be on this 10-day course online. It's interesting that it's online. Many people have a problem with online, but I think online gives accessibility to many who otherwise would not be able to do it. So I must thank Jayant Agrawal for inviting me to be part of what I think is a very important course on legislative drafting, public policy making, and legislative analysis. I must also put on record my sense of gratitude to Sambhav Initiative and Pro Bono India. Also, I must thank all those who are behind the scenes, who are working tirelessly to see this go through. I know it's difficult to organize a course, so thank you very much. As Avneet had pointed out in my bio note, I actually work in the realm of political theory, which is very different from public policy. However, I as a person love to take challenges. So I could not say no to Jayant Bhai. So when he called me, I just couldn't say no. So this is going to be perhaps one of the first lectures I'm going to give on public policy. I have studied it, but I've never given a public lecture in. I've given classroom lectures, but never a public lecture on it because for two reasons. One, it's really not my area of research. And second is that when I do it, because of my theory backing, I look at it very critically. Before I begin with the lecture, just two things. One is that um, I speak very fast. So if I'm too fast, please just tell me to slow down. There is no hurry, but this is natural to me. And second is a question. Are you comfortable with English or should I move between English and Hindi, whatever the organizers would prefer? Um, are you comfortable with English?
Madam, mostly participants are comfortable with English because many are belong from South area also. So
All right.
English will be the most
Yes.
comfortable language.
Done. All right. Thank you very much, Jen.
Yeah.
Bhai. So I hope I don't disappoint you, but I love taking challenges, as Jen Bhai would also know. And therefore, this is a challenge for me, my first lecture on public policy. I've done a lot of reading for it, so I haven't come here essay. I don't give lectures without preparation. I just hope I've prepared sufficiently enough. All right. So here we go. And my lecture, as the note points out, is on policy design, evaluation, legislative review, and impact assessment, which is a lot. I'm also given to understand that somebody will be joining us in about an hour who will be talking about the practical implementations of policy making and policy review and all that. And therefore, I would have to be a little sketchy in some parts of my lecture, but in other parts, I want to spend some time. So I've decided to be sketchy at some places because I won't be able to do justice to everything completely. I will mention everything, but some places I'm going to be sketchy. Before I get even to policy design, evaluation, legislative review, and impact assessment, I thought it's important for us to point out what is a public policy. And therefore, I just want to put few, and this may, you may all know this, and I will apologize if I'm being very banal at the moment, but I think it's important for us to put some things on the side as far as clarity is concerned. So a public policy, the very fact that you call it public, it means that it is not for all the people. So when we, for instance, let me give a very clear example, a very clear metaphor. When we wrote the Constitution of India, and when we read the preamble of India, we use the first three words of the preamble are, we the people of India, that is Bharat. So we the people of India, it's not we the public of India. So how do you distinguish people from public? And why do we say public policy and not people policy? Sometimes we say people's policy, which means something very different. But when we talk about public policy, what does public mean? To begin with, public does not mean everybody. Public is not all. Public is a specific part of the people. It is not meant, so a public policy is not meant for everybody. If a policy, or if you're saying this policy is meant for everybody, like, let me give you another example. When we started with Aadhaar was meant as a policy, but today it has become a kind of law because it is meant for everybody. So when you use the word public, you're not talking about people, you're talking about a particular group of people, not all. And this is one thing that we need to know. So when we say this is a public policy, for those of us who are trying to understand public policy making and public policy review, the first question you should ask is, what is the public? What does this policy focus on? Who is it focusing on? For instance, we have the reservation policy, and this is clear in the face. The reservation policy is not meant for everybody. For instance, we have the Nari Shakti Vandhan Adhiniyam. It's not meant for men. It's not meant for LGBTQI. It's meant only for women. So the first question that we need to, or the first concern that we need to put on the side is public policy is not meant for all the people. It is meant for a particular group of people. I'm not saying the other group of people are not public, so don't insinuate that. What I'm trying to say is that when we say this is a public policy, we have identified a group of people who this policy targets or who this policy is concerned with, like the reservation policy. Secondly, it's a policy. It's not a law, and both are interrelated, public and policy. It's a policy, it's not a law. A law applies to everybody. So for instance, as I said, Aadhaar today applies to everybody. At one time when it started, I, who am a professor in the university, I was not expected to get an Aadhaar card. But today, Aadhaar has become a kind of law. Or for instance, we have fundamental rights, which are laws in India. They are law-like in India because they apply to everybody. There is nobody who doesn't have. Yes, there are only two categories who don't have fundamental rights in India. One is the mad, and second is the child. Otherwise, everybody has fundamental rights. So that is what you call a law. A policy, however, does not apply to everybody. A policy is something which is specific. A policy is not objective. It is not without bias. It has a bias. So the reservation policy has a bias, and having a bias is not a problem. Huh? So don't misread the use of my word bias. It has a bias. That is because we will say caste system is also biased. So to correct caste system, even the reservation policy will have to be biased. Or for instance, Nari Shakti Vandhan Adhiniyam has a bias. Why doesn't it reserve seats for men? Because we will say society is patriarchal. So A public policy has a bias. A public policy is not universal or objective. For instance, if you look at the law of gravity, there is no bias. Sabko niche zameen pe hota. Everybody is on the ground. There is a magnetic pull for everybody. Nobody is left out. But in a policy, some people can be left out. Some people can be outside the policy narrative for just reasons. Those reasons have to be justified. I remember when even the Ujjwala scheme started for subsidized LPG cylinders, it was not meant for everybody. But it was meant, even today, it is not meant for it. It is meant only for some people, which is a just bias. That bias is just. Or for instance, you have scholarships, or for instance, you have the EWC. The EWC is not meant for everybody. And that bias perhaps is just. There was a court case, but that bias is just. Another thing I want to also put on the table is that the public policy is not eternal. It is temporal. It is temporary. It is meant to realize some objectives. Once those objectives are realized, it has to be pulled back. Like, again, the reservation policy, which is reviewed every 10 years by the parliament. And if the objectives have been realized, it has to be discontinued. So a policy is not like a law. I hope that the guarantees to equality, the guarantees to freedom are never pulled back. And I'm sure they will never be pulled back because those are laws. I hope the law of gravity does not stop. Otherwise, we are in for a big mess with the kind of construction work we have done in the world. But a law is something which is not time bound, but a policy is temporary, temporal, or time bound. And the last thing I want to say about policy, and then I would move to what is policy design, what is legislative review, what is evaluation. And I hope that I'm communicating. If I'm not, with the permission of Jain Bhai, I would request you to kindly tell me that I'm unable to communicate with you, because I think talking is a form of communication. The last thing I want to say about public policy is that it is essentially a political act. Making a public policy is a political act. Why do I say this? What do you mean by politics? And that is why you would see public policy is something which is essentially linked to either politics in thought, idea, like in universities. Most departments of political science teach public policy, or it is something which the political class does, whether the bureaucracy or the ministers, the representatives, they are involved in policy making, because policy, the whole realm of policy is a political act. Why do I say this? What is politics? It's interesting that when we talk about politics, the first thing that comes to our mind is politics is dirty. Why is politics dirty? Because politics is based on conflict. It's based on a kind of and conflict here does not mean maramari or killing each other or murdering each other or being violent. Conflict simply here means disagreement. There is a disagreement. If I have the right to disagree, that means I have the right to be political. But what is the disagreement on? The disagreement is on my interests. We all have interest. I'll tell you a short story, and this will actually help you, even if you're making a public policy, a policy perhaps for the wildlife in India. This will help you. So why do we have conflict? We have conflict because we have different interests. Where do these different interests come from? They come from the fact that we are reasonable creatures. We have reason. Whatever we are doing, there is a reason. There is a reason for you joining this online course. There is a reason for me joining here as a faculty. I hope I'm performing as a faculty. There is a reason why I'm teaching. We all have reasons. There is a reason why we get up in the morning and brush our teeth. So we are all reasonable creatures. How do I know I'm reasonable? I'll tell you a little story, and you tell me whether Plato was wrong or right. So, one thing about human history is that, and that is history. So story is we tell things through stories. आजकल नहीं होता है. Today this doesn't happen, but once upon a time, we'll hear grandmother's stories or grandma's stories, dadi ki kahaniyan, nani ki kahaniyan. Our grandmother will tell us stories, our mothers would tell us stories. So Socrates or Plato tells us one story about why we are reasonable. So he says that when God created all animals, the fly, the moth, the insect, the shark, the whale, humans, So they all go to God and say, how do you want us to live together? And this is a question for politics. That how do you want all of us to live together? We are all different. How should we all live together? So even if one question that we need to ask in India, for instance, is we have so many religions, so many languages, so many castes, so many ethnicities, so many likes and dislikes. How do we all live together? So God says, all right, I'll grant you each something to either attack or to defend. And this, I'm telling a story of Plato. Plato wrote this story in Apology. So all the animals stand in a line and begin to get something from God. And if you look at wildlife or you look at animal life, you would see that every living thing has something to attack or to defend. The fly has the reflux, the elephant has the size, the shark has the bite, the scorpion has the sting, the skunk has the smell, the sloth, even the tortoise has the shell. Everybody, every animal has something to attack or to defend. Man thinks, at that time, man thinks we are God's greatest creation. Therefore, God will reserve the best for us. So when he reaches, the line is over. When he reaches, God says, I've distributed everything. There's nothing left. And man says, now how do you want me to live? So God says, all right, I'll grant you reason. And what we have to do in life, perhaps, is use reason to attack or to defend. Through reason, we have created the nuclear bomb. Through reason, we have created state borders. Through reason, we have standing armies. Through reason, we have universities and schools. Through reason, we have policies. And what are these policies supposed to do? They're supposed to get us to live together despite our disagreements, not to throw the disagreement in the dustbin. Yes, there are many who would say we disagree with reservation. There are not so many, which is strange. There are not so many who will say we disagree with the Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam. I don't understand the difference. But there are very many who will say we disagree with reservation for caste. But there are fewer who would say we disagree with Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam. But even in spite of those disagreements, it's not to throw the disagreements in the dustbin. We should not be free from disagreements, but we should manage these disagreements. And therefore, public policy is one method of working out the way we're going to live together with our disagreements. So maybe when the gas subsidy thing, LPG, the Ujjwala scheme started, I was very, very disappointed. I said, why should I give up my subsidy on gas? And I had my disagreements, which are legitimate. But yes, later on, I did submit the form saying, listen, I give up my subsidy, because even if you have some disagreements, there are reasons for you to agree with the policy, or you will continue to disagree with the policy. With this, and therefore public policy is essentially political. One has to do two things when you're reading a policy, when you're trying to read out a policy. You try to read out, for instance, reservation policy or the Aadhaar policy or whatever. What you have to do is find the reason behind the policy. And two, you have to find out where is the politics underlying this policy? What is it trying to achieve? What interest is it trying to realize? And I will take this when I'm in the working out the policy evaluation and all that. So how have I begun this? When you're looking at a public policy, the first question is, what public are we talking about? It's not meant for everybody. It's a policy, therefore it's temporal. It's not lifelong. It's not like a law. It's not like the law of elasticity or the law of gravity. It's not a law. It's a policy. And the third is, we need to look at it as a political thing, as something which is political, it tells us how to live. In fact, I have never heard this word social policy as something which sells the way public policy sells. Because when we're talking about public, we're talking about the political space. With this, let me move to the first thing which is given, which is policy design. And I hope that this introduction will help you understand, or if you look at a policy, for instance, tomorrow, if the government of India comes out with a policy, how do you judge whether the policy is good or bad, or whether the policy is effective or not? You ask these three questions. One, who is it for? Two, how long are we going to have this for? How long is its duration? And three, in what is its reason and where is its politics located? All right, so let's begin with policy design. Now, something which I also didn't say, when we talk about the politics, we're talking about intentions. There is an intention which we have when we're talking about politics. So we intend to do things. The Constitution was written intentionally. It is not innocent. For instance, the number of MPs and MLAs we have is intended. These are intentional things. These are man-made things. They are not given to us by nature. Things which are given to us by nature are not intended. They are innocent. They are natural. But things which we have created are intentional. So, for instance, the clock that we have 24 hours, that is intentional. But perhaps the way the earth moves around the sun is not intentional. It is not intentional. It is not intended. What is a policy design? A policy design is a deliberate, intentional, conscious process. It's deliberate. It's not something which is natural or it just comes away. It's not something which is predetermined. It is something which is deliberate. You have to do it. It is something which is conscious. You're very conscious about what you're doing. And it is something which is intended. And it is meant to achieve some purposes. It is meant to work out. You're supposed to design a policy in order to realize some objectives. You have some objectives in mind, and you have to work out now a framework to realize these objectives. And this is what you will call policy. Let me give you an example. We had, for instance, at the break of, when we were becoming a republic, remember, we became a nation in 1950. Sorry, in 1947, we became a nation. In 1950, we became a republic. In 1952, we became a democracy. Elections were held after we became a republic, after we wrote the Constitution. So between 1946 and 1949, it was conscious to someone perhaps like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar that what we have is caste discrimination. And what is the objective? That there should be no caste discrimination. And therefore, we have the Constituent Assembly passing, yes, a law called abolition of untouchability. But there is also, as I keep on saying, the policy of reservation. So you have to have an objective, and you have to have a way of achieving that objective. And that way of achieving that objective, including the objective, is what you call a public policy. So there are 4 things you have to do when doing a policy design. There are 4 things which you'll have to work on. 1, you have to identify a problem. What is the problem? A public policy is always aimed at a problem. It's aimed at a concern. If you don't like the word problem, you think it's too harsh, then an issue. For instance, the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, again time-bound, it is meant only for 3 cycles. It's not meant for everybody. It is temporary and it is political. It is political because there's patriarchy. But what is the problem? The problem is that there are fewer women in the parliament, in the legislative assemblies, than the population of India. So you say, for instance, that even if there are 49% women in India, we have miserable less than 15% population in the women in the parliament or women in legislative assemblies. And this is not fair representation. Therefore, how do you achieve fair representation? Well, let's have Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam. But the first thing is you got to identify the problem. Perhaps one problem which the government identified recently over the last 10 years is that women are spending a lot of time on using coal and particularly firewood, which is bad for health. It's also bad for the environment because you'll have more tree chopping going on. And therefore, we have to give subsidized LPG. So you first have to identify the problem. Then you will have to formulate the goal. What is your goal? What is it that you want to achieve? What is your desired outcome or your desired objective? What is it that you want to achieve? It's very interesting. Sometimes I tell my students that if one problem in India is there is poverty, and there is a lot of poverty in India, if that is one problem, then perhaps your goal can be that it should continue. Let the problem continue. So after identifying the problem, you have to work out your goal. And this is the second step in policy design. Identify the formulation of your goal. And obviously, the formulation of the goal will be, there should be no poverty. If you look at, for instance, Trump believes there is a problem, that there are too many illegal immigrants in America. And what is his goal? His goal is to get rid of these illegal immigrants so that the resident American gets more opportunities for employment. That is what he says, but let's believe him. The third thing you will have to do is select your instruments. You will have to select how you will achieve your goal. What are the goals? How are you going to achieve your goal? So, for instance, one way of achieving our goals in India, which we are using too often, in my view, and I must apologize, my political theory will come into the lecture, because a political theory really means it's all about being critical. So one instrument which we have used, which we are using too much in India, is reservation. It's too much. So we have caste reservation, we have gender reservation, we have economic reservation, and then in some states you have religious minority reservation. I think reservation is too much of an instrument. I'm not saying for caste. I'm saying what is applicable for caste cannot be applicable for others. But how are you going to, for instance, scholarship is one instrument, fellowship is another instrument, subsidized ration is another. So what are the instruments that you will use to achieve your objective? And the fourth is, how will you implement this? So the consideration of your implementation strategies. So how are you going to implement it? And we know that, for instance, in Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, there is a whole, if you read the law, if you read the policy, it tells us how this is going to be implemented. So you will have to, when working out a policy design, this is like an architecture. And I'm looking at this as a building. So first you have to work out the structure of your building. What is the problem that you have? What is the problem that you're trying to address? What are the goals you're trying to achieve? What are the instruments that you will use in getting this, in realizing this objective? And finally, how are you going to implement it? You can't just say, for instance, let's have, for instance, when we had the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, there was a problem, and that was that there was open defecation in India. The government wanted not to have this. We wanted everyone to use a toilet. That was a problem. And therefore, and remember, this is not for everybody. This is not this policy was not, the toilets which were being constructed were certainly not for the rich. And that's why I'm saying it's not meant for everybody. So there was a problem. There was a goal that we should not have, one shouldn't be using the toilet in open. You will select your instruments. How are you going to get this to be done? And perhaps you will say we should have construction of toilets around the cities and particularly the villages. You should also promote it in homes. And how are you going to implement this? Are you going to give subsidy? Are you going to help? Or for instance, if we have the solar panel policy, which we have a lot in Gujarat. So this is about policy design. Identification of problem, formulation of goals, selection of instruments, and consideration of implementation strategies. And this is not innocent. So, one question which I often ask students is, if India is a country where there is so much of poverty, what is a policy that we have for eradication of poverty? Which is well thought of. What is our policy for what is our policy for the eradication of poverty? What is our policy for instance, you have the NEP now, the National Education Policy. The National Education Policy is meant to give us education in a qualitative, quantitative way. But how is it going to be? And this is what universities today are busy doing. They're implementing that. I was talking to somebody in UGC late last year, and I asked her, she was concerned with the NEP. So I asked her, how have you given instructions to the university about how to implement the NEP? And I got the most shocking response of my life when she said, you just have to implement one of the many things and it's done. I said, one of all that is written in the NEP? She said, yes. I said, this can't be true. Because you have to take everything. You can't just take one thing. But I won't name the person, but this is somebody from UGC. All right, so you have policy design. Let me move to the second, which is policy evaluation. Now, when you have designed your policy and you have implemented, the second thing that you've got to do is evaluate it. You have to evaluate. It's like when I frame a structure for a course, say I have a course on maybe political ideas, or I have a course maybe on the Constitution of India, and I implement it, I teach it. The next thing I've got to do is to evaluate it. And honestly, when I evaluate the paper with, like, I'm soon going to start the process of evaluation of 4 very strange papers which I introduce in the Department of Political Science here. They are very strange because they are taught nowhere but in this university in the whole of Gujarat. Nobody teaches them except I, which is not a problem, which is a problem, which is not something great. It's a problem in itself. So when I start evaluating the papers, I'm not really checking how much the student has learned. I'm really trying to find out how effectively did I teach? I'm convinced about one thing, that if students are not able to answer questions which we ask as teachers, the problem is not with the students, the problem is with the teacher. So you have to evaluate what you have put into implementation. You have to evaluate it. So for instance, we have test driving, right? So there is something which a car has been created and you test drive it. So policy evaluation is simply assessing the effectiveness of the policy, and wherever needed, you make some adjustments. When you need to, you make some adjustments, which you will have to. So again, coming to the evaluation process, which I do as an examiner, when I see, all right, fine, students are not comfortable with this part of my course, I simply tweak that course, that part, or add a few more reference materials. So evaluation is actually evaluating what you have put into implementation, or the effectiveness of the policy which you have. I know that there is a problem here because I don't think we are really evaluating the policies that we are bringing into implementation. Are we evaluating these policies? There are 4 types of evaluation that can be done. One is process evaluation. So you're evaluating the process. You're evaluating the process. For instance, one way, let's take the Ujjwala scheme, which is a policy of subsidized LPG. One way of evaluating the scheme is evaluate the process. How quick can I get a subsidized LPG if I belong to BPL, or if I'm below poverty line, or if I'm of that particular public which this policy is addressing? How easy can I get it? Is it very easy for me to register for a LPG cylinder? How many days does it take for me to get that LPG cylinder? What is the process of verification of my economic standard as far as getting that subsidized? So the process is evaluated, and whenever we feel, all right, there is a hiccup over here, there is a problem over here, those hiccups or those problems need to be plugged. You need to plug those problems. I have often asked students in my class that if we have the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, do you think I deserve reservation? Lajwanti Chatani, do you think I, Lajwanti Chatani, deserve reservation? And they find this a problem because they can't tell me some of them tell me on my face, no, you don't. But I know that I don't deserve reservation. Now, if that policy comes into implementation, I think one thing that we will have to do is ask this question: do all women deserve reservation? Remember, all men are not getting reservation. Yes, I know that all women are um, are part of the patriarchal structure, but there are some women who are contributing to patriarchy. Do they deserve reservation? Remember, patriarchy is not something which only men do; it's also something which women do. So the process evaluation is really about how the process unfolds. The second type of evaluation is outcome evaluation. You're evaluating the outcome. And this is what we keep on doing as far as policies are concerned. We are concerned with the outcome. So for instance, what is the outcome and you would see there are a lot of news reports of the outcome of the Ujjwala scheme. There are a lot of outcome evaluations about Make in India and Digital India. These are also policies. Digital India is a policy. Make in India is also a policy. So there are a lot of outcome evaluations which we see as far as Digital India, Make in India, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. And we need to keep on, or even the reservation policy. The reservation policy is also something that we keep on, the outcome. We look at the outcome and we ask, all right, what is the percentage of the reserved categories of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes? What is the population which have got the benefit of reservation? And outcome will tell us how successful our policy is. The third type of evaluation is impact evaluation. Outcome and impact are two very different things. The outcome is something which is evident in the form of the end. This is what happened in the end. That maybe 15% of STs and 7% of SCs did benefit from reservation, because reservation is fully implemented according to the constitutional provisions. But what is the impact of that? There will be two impacts quickly. There will be many, but let me just give you two very simple impacts, and they are opposite impacts. One impact is, yes, this has led to some dignity, some respect, some equality of opportunity for SCs and STs in mainstream public life in India. That they are now getting credibility, dignity. I am very concerned with the guarantee of dignity in India. Because rather than including roti, kapra or makan, I think we have to add two more things, that is freedom and dignity, which we do not give much importance to. Roti, kapra or makan can be gained only by income. Agar mere paas income hai, if I have income, I can take care of roti, kapra or makan. Roti will come, kapra will come, makan will also come. But we need to add two more things in my view, which is freedom and dignity. So one impact evaluation will be perhaps that after 15 and 7% to STs and SCs respectively, it has led to some correction of the caste system, some correction of the denial of the caste system. The second impact that you can have is, despite reservation, there is no change in the unequal, unjust status of SCs and STs in India. We can do this with the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam. You can do this with the Ujjwala scheme. You can do this with, and one policy which I have said this several places, that when we became free in 1947 and when we became democratic in the early 1950s, what we focused on in terms of our education policy was, and this was the Nehru's vision, we focused on institutions of higher learning, higher education, like IITs, IIMs, IISC in Bengaluru. We focused on that, which is not wrong. I'm not saying that is wrong. But what did we do? What didn't we do? We didn't focus on primary education. All right. We did focus on that. And the impact of that is what we are seeing today. Look at the number of privatized, and this is just one question for the participants. Can you tell me one public school which is commendable, which is great in India? I can tell you many private schools which are great in India. They are doing fascinatingly well. But one public school which is doing fascinatingly well, and we don't have an answer. Compare this with how many public universities are doing very well, and how many private universities are doing. We're not seeing the private universities yet doing very well, because I think this was a policy lack in terms of the impact. The outcome was, yes, maybe the outcome was that people landed up in universities and schools, but the impact of this is that the education has not, quality education has not been given at the primary. Yes, outcome is that we do have a good literacy rate. We do have good educational standards in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality. So impact will look at the quality of what you're doing. And the last way of doing this is cost benefit analysis. What is the cost and what is the benefit of what you are doing? So what is the cost, for instance, of the LPG? And what is the benefit of the Ujjwala scheme? And this is something that we have to keep on playing with. What is the cost, for instance, of building a dam? And what is the benefit of building a dam? What is the cost of maybe Swachh Bharat Abhiyan? And what is the benefit of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan? If the benefit is lower than the cost, then it's a bad policy. And I think this is what we do in our daily lives. If I go out to buy a packet of bread, a loaf of bread, and someone tells me you have to pay 10,000 rupees for this loaf of bread, there must be something wrong with me to buy that loaf of bread. I might as well buy many loaves of bread for the whole month rather than one loaf of bread just for maybe 2 days of eating. So you have to look at the cost and the, absolutely, it's a Benthamite approach, a utilitarian approach, which would say that what is the utility you're getting? Also, yeah, in response to Vikramaditya, I'm also going to say, is it impacting upon the most here? Although in public policy, you will not say it should impact upon the greatest number. I'm not going to use the word majority here, because majority means something very different. The majority is not necessarily the most number. It can be the least number, but those with a lot of power. So I'm not going to use the word majority, minority. It will take me to another debate. But a public policy should not, it's not necessarily successful if many are taken care of. A public policy, the cost benefit analysis will have to be done in terms of, has it achieved its objectives? And in its objectives, it was never meant to only satisfy the greatest number. To agar 100 में से 50 लोगों का भला हो गया, if 100 out of 150 have been benefited, it's done. No, a policy will have to take care of everyone, which is there when we were working out the objectives of the policy. All right. So therefore, there are four steps in policy design, and I'll just go back a little bit. The identification of the problem, the formulation of the goals, the selection of the instruments, and the consideration of implementation. How are you going to implement it? Similarly, there are four ways of evaluation. And this is, I love doing this so that one can remember: process evaluation, outcome evaluation, impact evaluation, and cost benefit analysis. Sometimes we look too much at cost benefit analysis. We don't pay much attention at process evaluation, but we have to look at all four and maybe judge whether the policy should continue. I think they have already decided that Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, in terms of cost benefit analysis, is good only for 15 years. I do not know whether it is 15 years or 3 elections. Because if we have more than 3 elections in less than 15 years, then would the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam be lesser than 15 years? And then it will get into, this is what you call sunset clause. It's a sunset clause that after 3 elections, this Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam will not be implemented at all, because we've given 33% one chance to stand for elections. So after that is what is called sunset clause. Let me take legislative review. India is a country where the legislature makes laws. And I will just take about 10 more minutes and then open it up for discussion with your permission, Avneet. Since the legislature makes laws, makes acts, makes policies, the cabinet makes policies, it will have to go back to the legislature for review. It can't go, sometimes, yes, I must say this, sometimes Law Commission of India also, and you've had many chief justices, you've had many members of the judiciary coming and talking to you. So you would have learned that even the judiciary, for instance, I'll just give you an example. The judiciary of India had I think the Law Commission of India, if I'm not mistaken, and if I am, I apologize. I think it was the Law Commission of India which had pulled back what was in 1856. This was passed. It was the Hindu Widow Remarriage Act, because when the colonial master came to India, he said, "Why, this is barbaric. Why can't widows marry again?" He did not obviously know that in India we have the concept of, in Hindu India, not in India, but in Hindu India, you have the concept of pativrata. Vrat is one time, pati is pati, husband. Pati vrata is one husband. Ek hi time khana hai. So widow remarriage was not permitted. This is the meaning of pati vrat. And therefore widow remarriage was not permitted. So the colonial master brought in this Hindu Widow Remarriage Act in 1856. And later on, after we got the Hindu code and the Hindu law was codified, the Law Commission of India said, we don't need this anymore, because it is already permitted in the Hindu code for widows to remarry. So now you do not need the Hindu widow. And this is what the legislature, sometimes the judiciary does. Judiciary does this in interpreting. When they interpret the law, judiciary does it is when they make the law, they have to look at it. So legislative review of a policy, you examine the policy, you look at the existing policy and see which policy should be taken back. I'll give you a very, very simple example. It is left for the legislature of India to decide whether and when to stop the reservation policy of India. It goes to the legislature every 10 years for review, and the legislature decides whether to continue it or not. Up till now, the legislature has continued it, that we still need reservation. And I think it's apt. We do need reservation still in India, until we have not found another, perhaps better solution to caste atrocities and caste violence and caste inequality. But it goes to the legislature. It doesn't go to the people of India. It doesn't go to it doesn't go, how should I say this? It doesn't go maybe to the secretariat. It goes to the legislature. The legislature reviews the reservation policy, decides whether it should be continued for another 10 years, and we move ahead. And this has to be done by the representatives of the people, because India is a democracy. Who makes law? My representative, your representative, our representatives. They make the laws. So they will have to, and the very fact that they are doing it means we are doing it. So they would, if they decide that, for instance, and if they decide, for instance, Ujjwala scheme is there, if they decide Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is there, if they decide NEP is there, then it's assumed that the people are deciding that this is all done. There are I'll give 4 reasons for why we need legislative review. First is you have to ensure the relevance and effectiveness of what you are calling a policy. There should be some relevance to your policy. As I was talking about the Hindu Widow Remarriage Act, it's irrelevant because you already have the Hindu code. And sometimes you would see there are conflicting things. I'll give you another policy which was there. When the Right to Information Act was passed, there was a lot of question about the Official Secrets Act. The Official Secrets Act of India says that officers, the bureaucracy, can keep secrets from us. Now, look at the contradiction. On one hand, you have Official Secrets Act. On the other hand, you have Right to Information. And they're cutting each other. So if I go to the bureaucrat and says, listen, I'm filing an RTI, कि मेरा pension क्यों नहीं मिल रहा है? He can simply bring the Official Secrets Act in front of me and say, listen, I don't have to respond to you. I'm behind the curtain of Official Secret Act. This was the indemnity of the bureaucracy that they did not need to answer. So there was a lot of talk when Aruna Roy and Rahul Dev I'm forgetting the other person, but when Aruna Roy and they brought in the RTI, there was a lot of talk about what is going to happen to the Official Secrets Act. So you have to make your Harsh Mandar was later. There were two, I think, Aruna Roy and some Rahul Dev or something like that. We can check it. What is amazing about the world we live in is Nikhil Day. Thank you so much, Veena, for that. Nikhil Day. So Nikhil Day and Aruna Bakshi. Harsh Mandar was there, but I think Harsh Mandar was more with the food security, the cash transfer and food act. So you have to do this. Let me give you one example of this, again on caste. So it is mandatory for all chief ministers in India, and this is part of effectiveness of policy, to have what is called State Vigilance Monitoring Committee. And this has to meet twice a year, January and July, to check the implementation of the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocities Act. It's mandatory. And this is what you will call legislative review. Who is the chief minister? He's part of the legislature. What is he doing? He's reviewing the Atrocities Act to see is it being implemented? Are we doing well with it or not? So the first is ensuring effectiveness and relevance. It's also interesting that we've abolished, and those of you who are in the legal profession will know this, that we have decriminalized adultery. Section 497 of the Constitution of the Criminal Code has been decriminalized. So adultery today is not a crime per se. And this was done because, we just felt, listen, this is irrelevant today. Another reason why legislative review has to be there is to identify gaps and inconsistencies. I was talking about this inconsistency between the RTI and the Official Secrets Act. So you have to identify gaps. One example which I would like to give you is about the IT Act 2000. Now, when the IT Act was passed in 2000, the Information Technology Act was passed in 2000, we had to amend it so that cyber crimes would be included under its purview, because the world keeps on changing. Today, I think, again, they're now coming up with the Data Protection Act, because we have artificial intelligence, we have mapping going on, you have data theft going on, you have intellectual property rights, which are now, you have patents. I mean, my whole life is now either my retina or my thumbprint. Everything can be got from my thumbprint. My Aadhaar is generated on my thumbprint. And this all has to be protected. And there is now a gap. So earlier ration card, I'm sure all of you are very young, but we used to take our ration card. But now the ration card is not, in fact, even the Aadhaar is not needed. You just put in, when I traveled to Dubai to see my brother, I land at Dubai airport. I don't even need my passport in my hand. There is a eye scanner, retina scanner over there, and it just says, look into this light. I look into the light and it recognizes me and recognizes that I've come on a visit visa, and the doors open and I go in. So I think the IT Protection Act, the IT Act of 2000 has undergone and will continue to undergo a lot of changes, keeping in mind this leaps and bounces with information technology. The third thing that I wanted to talk about is the third reason why we need legislative review is to address unintended consequences. If there are unintended consequences, that has to be addressed. I think one thing which the Ujjwala scheme has to look at is unintended consequences. Unintended consequences of the Ujjwala scheme, I think, are that, I'll give you also of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. The unintended consequence of the Ujjwala scheme is that I don't think it was envisaged that LPG prices will become so expensive that the subsidy will not prove enough. And I think this is where process evaluation has to be done. That if we are giving subsidized LPG to the lower income groups, then are they even able to afford that? So is there the consequence of this? And if they are not able to afford it, the question is, where is this subsidy going? Because remember, we're all paying now, those of us who are above poverty line are paying now exorbitant prices for this. So where is the subsidy going? So unintended consequences have to be looked at, and that is what is done by the legislature. Another thing, perhaps, which I've heard, I'm not sure, I haven't done any empirical research on this. I have done some empirical work on the Ujjwala scheme, but on the Swachh Bharat, not yet. That you build, for instance, there are toilets, but there is no flowing water. There are no taps. There is no drainage. Now, this is an unintended consequence, or maybe it was not envisaged that this will be a problem, because remember, there is this concept of pits. You build a pit and we continue using the pit. But when you have a toilet, you need a drainage, you need a tap, and it should be flowing. It should not go stagnant. So these are unintended consequences, and that is why legislative review is required. And the last is obviously improving accountability. The fourth, I've given you 4 for policy design, 4 for evaluation, and now 4 for legislative review, that you need to improve accountability. There has to be accountability. You have to know who is accountable for and therefore, for instance, if the legislative review takes place perhaps of these toilets which were built without flowing water, there has to be somebody who is held accountable for it. In Baroda, where I live, there is a bridge. On the bridge, there is a junction. And I really hope that sometime they take a call on how can you build a junction on a bridge? Because on both sides of the road, on 2 sides of the road, those roads are not being used. So there have to be, I'm talking, I'm talking about the Lal Bagh Bridge, which, one really needs to look into who is accountable for this. Let me move to the last part, and this is not much, is impact assessment. So I've spoken on policy design, I've spoken on evaluation, I've spoken on legislative review. I move to impact assessment, which will not take more than 2 minutes. And I will then, I think, be well in time I would request you to please bombard me with questions and criticisms, and do tell me whether I have read enough or not. Impact assessment. What is the difference between evaluation and assessment? Evaluation is one time at the end. So for instance, at the end of the year, we evaluate. What is assessment? Assessment is a continuous process. We will continuously assess things. I think we do this with our children. We continuously assess the growth of our child. But as a teacher, although I do assessment, but we are expected to evaluate. Uska paper dekh ke we have to give marks, not assessing. So when you assess, assessing is like a continuous process. Evaluation is one time. So what is impact assessment? You have to keep on assessing the impact of things. This impact assessment helps in letting the policymakers and the legislatures know whether the policy is good enough, the policy needs reform, and I think impact assessment also is more cost benefit, is more benefit prone, because if you realize that the policy that you have, if you're in an assessment mode and not in an evaluation mode, but if you're assessing it, you'll be able to plug the problems immediately and not wait for the end. So for instance, if I have a policy which I'm putting into implementation today, and I say, okay, in 1 year, I will evaluate whether this is a good policy or not. But if I'm also assessing the policy, then I'm able to know immediately there is a problem and plug that problem. So impact assessment is something which public policy makers and public policy reviewers keep on doing in order to know whether when to tweak, how quickly to tweak. And I think this is something that tomorrow, I'm not talking about today, tomorrow we will have to do, because the world we are living in is moving at a pace. We are moving at a speed which is unprecedented. I say this to many, that the changes which have taken place in our everyday life over the last 25 years have not taken place in the last 250 years. We were with the telephone, with the landline for good about 150 years. But the developments which have taken place in the last 25 years are much more than the last 200 years. And we will have to, I think, promote impact assessment rather than evaluation, not wait for the policy to be done with and then look at its impact, then look at its outcome, then look at the process, and then look at the cost benefit. I don't think that is the way we should be doing things. Therefore, impact assessment will say, as you hit ground and start running, you have to look at every step you are taking and you have to assess every step. Maybe you will have to take a left turn, right turn, maybe hopefully not go back, but maybe stop for some time, add more people, remove some people. You'll have to impact assess continuously. And I think this is what tomorrow is going to tell us to do, because as I said, the world we are living with, particularly information technology, is something which is changing the way we have lived. There are many ways of doing impact assessment. One is macro assessment. You take the whole thing into consideration. This is very tough, especially for a country like India. There is also micro assessment. And when we have things like, for instance, nutrition, gender, when you look at nutritional value, you look at malnutrition, you look at sex ratios. These are micro considerations. You look at food intake, you look at educational statistics, you look at school dropout. These are all micro assessors. Macro assessors are obviously GDP and manufacturing index and all that, which are huge indices. And for instance, if we recognize today that India is falling in manufacturing index, we have to, but this is an evaluation. What we have done is evaluation. We have waited for the quarter to finish, and then we have said India is falling in manufacturing indices. If it is done as an assessment, then perhaps we'll be able to know, we would have known before this that India is falling in manufacturing. Or for instance, if we do sex ratio in terms of assessment, we will know that India has a skewed sex ratio, or which states have skewed sex ratio, how we need to correct these skewed sex ratios, rather than wait for us to say that we are poor in sex ratio, we are poor in malnutrition. Ab kya kare? So, it's like, let me give you this analogy and stop. When I'm cooking food and I realize, okay, shayad बहुत पानी भर गया है, बहुत I'm a bad cook, huh? तो मैं चावल बना रही हूँ और बहुत पानी चला गया है, then what do? You just increase the intensity of the gas and पानी को सूखने दो. This is what I do. Or you remove the rice and you let it dry and then you have it. You let the water soak out. But if you this is assessment. What is evaluation? You let the water dry normally and you will realize you have overcooked rice. You've made khichdi rather than rice. Now you don't have boiled rice. Now you have khichdi. You wanted to make rice, you made khichdi. Have you realized your objective? No. You have realized something else. I'm not saying khichdi is a bad meal, but you didn't cook what you wanted to cook. Let me stop here. This is what I know I've rushed through it, but let me stop here and with the permission of Dr. Gupta as well as Jen Bhai, let me request for questions and comments and even criticisms. I really love when participants criticize. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful talk and then thoughts. So, participant, if you have any question, you can put in the chat box or you can raise your hand. We'll take 2-3 questions. Yeah, Vikramaditya.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I just want to thanks to organizer and want to comment on your session. This is one of the finest session I have ever heard on policy. This is one of the finest session. In nutshell, you have covered every aspects. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, organizer. Ma'am, I just want to know, like in the previous session as well, I have also asked this question to one of the speaker, and ma'am, again, I'm too much confused on what is the role of the judiciary. Up to what extent the judiciary can review the policy, ma'am?
Can I take the question, Dr. Gupta? I'll take one question at a time.
Yeah, ma'am. We'll take a 2-3 questions. So starting with.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Vikramaditya, for your question. It's an important question. And thank you for your words of appreciation. It gives me a lot of confidence because, as I said, this is my first lecture on public policy outside the classroom. It's very convenient to speak in the classroom. Although for me, my students are very critical of me all the time, but it's very difficult when you come out in a public lecture. So thank you very much for your words of appreciation. They do mean a lot. What is the limit of judicial review of a policy? So the judiciary can only interpret a policy. They cannot draft a new policy. They can only interpret. So if it is within the interpretation, and what is interpretation, then is a huge controversy. I'll give you an example. There was this, I think last year, there was a petition filed in the Supreme Court that same-sex marriages must also get insurance, benefits of insurance policy. What was this? This was simply interpreting insurance policies and say life insurance, car insurance, and hereditary policies. What are the policies for inheritance and adoption? It was only interpretation. Is it possible to interpret our insurance policies in such a way that my same-sex partner gets the benefit when I die of that? It was a matter of, so when the petition was filed, the assumption was that it is possible only in terms of interpretation. What the Supreme Court did was said, no, this is not interpretation. This is actually making a new policy. It is giving new meaning to the policy that we have, because it would mean working out a new meaning of marriage, a new meaning of what is called a family, and which is not available at the moment, which cannot be interpreted, or this is not taking, to put it simply, Vikramaditya, this is not taking meaning off, this is giving new meaning. इसमें हम नया मतलब दे रहे हैं. We are not taking the matlab from it. We are giving new meaning to it. And the judiciary cannot give new meaning. The judiciary only has to take the meaning of what is given. This is the limit of judicial review. This is why in India, we are a legislative democracy. And it is important for us to continue like this, because it means the people are deciding, the people are making law, not those who we have not elected, namely the judiciary. It is sad that legislature is low. The credibility of the legislature is lower than the judiciary. It should be the opposite. The credibility of the legislature should be very high as compared to the judiciary. But in fact, if you look at America, you don't see too much of the judiciary over there. So what is the limit of this? It's in terms of interpretation. Are you able to, the words that are used in a policy, are you able to get meaning from it? That is what the judiciary will do. The judiciary cannot give new meaning to a policy. It cannot do that. So for instance, if we have the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, and a man goes there and says, listen, maybe bahut nari, mujhme bahut femininity hai. I am also a feminine. I have feminine characteristics. And I also want reservation from this. Then the Supreme Court cannot read or judicially review that policy in that light. It will then have to go to the legislature, to the parliament. The parliament will then decide whether those men who are victims of patriarchy will also get Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam ke benefits. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
There are a lot of questions.
Madam, we will take one more question as Devan sir also joined us. So
okay.
After that, we will start his
Which
session.
question should I take? Why don't you decide?
No, you can take a last one that related to patent by Anusri.
India patent policy successful ensuring public interest against a monopoly approach with special reference to pharmaceutical patents and health rights. How do we assess the impact? So you're right. I'm not sure. I think we're still in the midst of evaluation or assessing our patent policy. I don't think we have, especially during the COVID. I think the COVID was our wake-up call that we need to look at patents, generic drugs, and patented drugs. And I think if I were to give you an honest response to this, I think we're in the process of still looking at the impact and evaluating this patent as far as pharmaceutical industries are concerned. The problem is obviously that the pharmaceutical industries will want to hold on to the patent, because once the patent goes away, they lose their property rights over that, and therefore they lose their profit over that. So pharmaceutical industry is a very, very difficult industry to deal with. It is one which is involved with health of people, which is basic. It's human right. It is state's responsibility. On the other hand, the pharmaceutical industry is also a profit-making industry. How are you going to balance both these is something which the government, I think, is still trying to maneuver. It is still, and we saw this during the COVID, it is still trying to maneuver this. Okay, what are we supposed to do with this profit vis-a-vis public interest? Profit vis-a-vis the public interest is something that we are still trying to negotiate. I hope I've answered the question.
I think, madam,
Yes.
There are a lot of questions, I know, but
will, madam, let me give a vote of thanks before we start our second part. So thank you very much, Lajwanti ma'am, for your great insight, I would say, and the practical experience. But we couldn't feel this is your first lecture in public domain. Again, it's like as a student, we listen to you, and I hope participant, if they, because we like we are not taught this public policy in our law school, only law rule regulations. Again, there should be proper integration of public policy. Even, for example, BLLB student, we have BLLB course, so I think they can have privilege. But what about the BCom and the BSc, this kind of the 5 year integrated course? So this kind of thing can be discussed at particular point of time while teaching law. Really great integration. So thank you very much. And then on behalf of the committee, like to
may I just, may I just, may I
Yeah, no.
just thank once again, Jayant Agarwalji, as well as both Pro Bono and Sambhav Initiative, as well as you, Dr. Gupta, and thank you all the participants.
Yes. Thank you very much, madam, for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent session.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. Devan sir, am I audible to you?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello. Hi. Yes, you're audible.
Yes, yes, yes. Sir, with your permission, we would like to start session.
Yes, absolutely. Let's begin. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, yes, yes. Avneet, please introduce sir so that we can start session.
Good evening, sir. With your kind permission, can I start?
Yes, good evening. Yes, please.
Good evening. A very warm welcome to our esteemed dignitary, Mr. Devansh Shah, sir, and all the participants to the 10 days online national capacity building program on legislative drafting, public policy making, and legislative analysis, jointly organized by Sambhav Initiative and Pro Bono India. Where today's session is all about practical session on policy design, evaluation, and impact assessment. I have Neetka, delegate of Sambhav Initiative, and today's moderator of this session. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Before I move forward, I would like to mention that the last few minutes of the session will be reserved for the question and answers. It is my privilege to introduce our esteemed dignitary, Mr. Devansh Shah, sir, Policy Consultant, Government of India. Sir is a young professional working towards initialization and implementation of people-centric policies with BJYM and Honorable MP Shri Devasin Chauhan, sir. Sir is also a national team member of BJYM Policy Research and Training Team. Sir is in an IREX CEE Fellow to 2024. It is a youth leadership development program run by the US Department of the State, which brings together young leaders from 100 nations, where Sir has represented India. Sir has worked with the Jewish Social Services Agency, contributing to researching and drafting mental pay parity legislature in the DMV states of US. Sir was invited by the Embassy of Israel while in the US. Sir has also been invited by the President of the ECO SOC to attend and speak at 2024 United Nations Economic and Social Council Youth Forum on youth shaping sustainable and innovative solutions, reinforcing the 2030 agenda and eradication of poverty in times of crisis. Sir is committed to mental health cause and is working on the nationwide initiative towards the eradication of the stigma and prevention of substance abuse, self-harm and suicides. His focuses are public policy, mental health, skill development, youth engagement and development, food for all, female hygiene and foreign affairs. We are deeply honored to have you with us today, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for that really kind introduction. First of all, at the outset, I would like to thank Sambhav Initiative, Pro Bono, and Jayan Bhai for having me here. The, the, the topic I've been given for today is practical implementation of policy, or what does policy look like in real life. I want to begin with a very simple example. I'm sure a lot of us might be viewing this on our cell phones. Imagine that now we're at somebody else's house, our phone is dying, and you ask for a charger. Now they hand you a charger, but it's a micro USB, and you have a USB-C phone, or worse, it could be an Apple Lightning cable from the older generations. Now suddenly this very modern, very expensive device becomes nothing more than a glorified paperweight. And in that moment of panic, we often think, why can't all phones just have one charger? Or why can't government just pass a law and standardize all of this? Just one charger for all the devices, just one port to rule them all. It sounds so efficient, convenient and logical. But yet this seemingly small issue opens up a huge question in the public policy space. That is, when should the state intervene and what should it leave alone? Because once you start imagining government involvement in chargers, you must ask, who chooses the standard? How do we enforce it? Now, when we say that, we can have a legislative council, a bunch of members of parliament, or maybe our MLAs, beginning to decide, are we really trusting them with the choice that they are wise and impartial enough to make this? Can we ensure that the standards that they come up with are technologically sound with the rest of the world? What if a Taiwanese company comes out with a brilliant device that uses a banned port? Do we ban Indian citizens from using it? Imagine what happens when something like a smartwatch or a smart ring, for that example, the Type-C charger becomes too bulky for it. How do you compensate for it? Do we stop Indian citizens from buying it? Once you stop Indian citizens from buying it, that means there's going to be a black market for chargers that's going to be out there. What about travelers coming in from outside India? Are you going to fine them for bringing in chargers that are prohibited in India? Suddenly, a simple choice of a charger becomes a case study in coercion, enforcement, black markets, and unintended consequences. So this is what I want our entry point today, into the larger and deeper exploration of public policy. How it actually works in the real world, and more importantly, how it should work. Now, a public policy often begins with the best of intentions, but intentions are never translated into outcomes. You see, governments have extraordinary power. That is power to tax, power to imprison, power to command. And it was Mahatma Gandhi who once told us that the individual has a soul, but the state is a soulless machine. So every time we say that the government should do this, we are inviting coercion into the society. So before asking that this should be done, we must ask, should it be done by the state at all? This is the first question of public policy. It is a question that we collectively don't ask enough. So now I personally have 4 tests for whether a public policy, should be introduced. There should be 4 legitimate grounds that your problem should meet for a requirement of public policy into the space. So, I would call them market failures. First of all would be externalities. When your action affect others who did not agree to them. For example, a factory polluting the air causes a negative externality, but a university sparking entrepreneurship in a town creates a positive externality. So markets tend to produce overtly negative or underproduce positives. The state has to step in to correct that. The second one would be asymmetric information, when one party knows more than the other. For example, like a patient does not know what medicine they are buying, if they are real or not. This could break down trust, destroy market, and invite fraud. So this is where the state should step in. Third would be market power, where monopolies can distort the choices and prices. If 1 or 2 firms dominate a market, for example, the spectacles or telecom industry, they can charge more, innovate less, and control consumer behavior, control how we behave in the market. So regulators should exist in this space to check this power. And the fourth space for me is public goods. So anything like clean air, national security, street lighting that cannot be produced efficiently by private firms because they are non-rival and non-excludable. No firm can charge you for, breathing clean air. The state has to step in and provide these goods. So if a proposed policy does not fall into any of these 4 categories, we have to be deeply skeptical about it. So this test, what market failure are we addressing, should be the first filter that we place in every single policy discussion. Now let's say that the state has passed this test and it has moved on and the intervention is justified. So what happens next? Because designing policy does not simply mean that we're stating goals. It is about building a machine that will effectively deliver those goals at a timely basis. And that machine requires a lot of things. It requires a precise problem definition. It requires data and evidence. It requires clear incentives. It requires stakeholder conciliation. And above all, it requires humility about the real world complexity. Because Really good policies often fail not due to bad intent, but due to bad design. I personally believe that a policy is not a poem, it's a machine, and a badly built machine will not run. For example, the national education policy, right? The national education policy took years and years of consultation, drafts, debates, and pilots. And even now, it is evolving slowly because education is one of the hardest sectors to reform. Purely because there are so many stakeholders involved, the outcome is completely huge, and it is very difficult to bring in a drastic change because it might result in unintended consequences. So I believe that is a good policy design, that is deliberate, that is inclusive, and that is iterative. Now, change is not always a failure in policy, because even the best designed policy will fail if it does not evolve. Societies change, technologies change, people change, and policy has to keep up with the pace. A very beautiful example, I would give two examples in this space. A beautiful example would be the OTT bill that we're currently discussing and deliberating, and we have not been able to deliver yet. The OTT is a space that has constantly been evolving. Nobody thought 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that this would become such a huge industry in India. But coming with COVID, even a little bit before that, I would say you had a lot of OTT platforms suddenly springing up, and there was no regulation to keep them in touch. So that is something that has to be done. Now, the exact other side of this example would be Aadhaar. Aadhaar was introduced to fix leakages in the public distribution system. But today, Aadhaar powers our banking, it powers our digital KYC, it powers our vaccine tracking, it powers your entry into airports, it powers most of the digital tech that the government is offering today. And it has evolved not by accident, but by design. Because a rigid policy is like a brittle bone. It will break under stress. So we must build policies like living systems, they should be able to adapt and grow. Now, after all of this, when you have created your policy design, it is adaptable also. What happens next? The next is your legislative firewall, scrutiny before the power, where the legislature is our firewall that protects society from bad laws. Sometimes we have seen in the past where laws have been rushed, poorly drafted, overtly delegated, rarely scrutinized. A simple example would be the chaos around crypto regulation. 1 week we hear that it will be banned, the other week it's classified as an asset. That is not policy, that is panic. So every law that passes without scrutiny becomes a future court case. A very good example again would be the recent bills that have been brought into parliaments, I don't have to go anywhere else. I don't want to be too controversial about this, but the Waqf bill is coming into the parliament tomorrow. It is going to be placed before the Lok Sabha tomorrow. Now, when the Waqf bill is being placed in front of the Lok Sabha, you have to realize, go to the background of it. Because initially when the Waqf bill was presented, it was then sent out for public consultations where you had huge number of people coming out and telling the government what they wanted or what they understood from this bill and how they wanted changes in it. After that, it was referred to a joint parliamentary committee where a select group of MPs were selected to debate and deliberate on it and to come up with a bill that would be acceptable to all. After that healthy discussion took place, a joint parliamentary committee came out with its report. Based on that report, a new bill was formed, and tomorrow that bill is going to be presented into the House. But again, this doesn't mean that the bill is going to be immediately passed. The bill will again go through scrutiny, where you will see members from both sides of the government coming forward either in support or against the bill and presenting their views and voices on it. And similarly, according to the majority of the House, will the bill be passed? So legislative review is where policy meets democracy. And this is very important. It's something that I don't know how many of you follow the legislative processes that go on, but if you do, then it is something that I would recommend that you check out tomorrow, because you will get to see that in real life. I don't think there is a better practical example of it. Now, after the law has passed, we assume that the policy work is over. There is nothing more to be done. But impact assessment, it is one of the most ignored questions in the Indian policy making space. Where did we make the money? Not did we spend the money? I'm sorry, it's just a call. What I meant was, did the policy work? Did we actually make changes? It should not be, did we spend the money? Did we get the media coverage? But did it change lives? For this, we need cost-benefit analysis, regulatory impact assessments, outcome-based budgeting, behavioral data. Here, I want to give you my own example. During the previous government, I was working as a policy advisor to the Honorable Minister of State for Communications. While in his office, we were working on an initiative called the Antyodaya Shramik Suraksha Yojana. As the name suggests, it was to ensure that every single laborer of the nation was covered in this scheme. Now, if you look at the Shramik portal, it covers more than 150 occupations under it, where it basically means that these laborers can get access to a list set of benefits. What we wanted to add on to that was we wanted to deliver an accidental health insurance to them. And we did. We delivered an accidental health insurance of 10 lakh rupees at an annual premium of 500. Now, what we could have done was we could have made this scheme and we could have just said, hey, our job is done. We've made this scheme. It is all good. But that's not where we ended, because we wanted to make this an effective policy decision. So we took a few steps in place. When we had to do it, we understood that reaching these laborers is going to be a task. How are you going to ensure that you are able to reach, for a pilot project, we had to reach more than 25 lakh laborers within the span of a month. How do you reach 25 lakh laborers in a month? Because being a government, you cannot directly approach private entities. You cannot directly tell them to board them up. So what we did was we found out the biggest labor unions in place. We reached out to them. We asked them to support us with this. We held on-ground camps along with the Indian Postal Division, because the only organization that is able to reach to the last steps of the Indian society is the Indian Postal Department, which is also under the Ministry of Communications. With them, we were able to effectively reach everybody. Now, after that comes the second important question, where during, I don't know how many of you have gone through the insurance process, but usually with accidental health insurance, one of the major headaches is getting the claims passed. A lot of the times, insurance companies either reject your claims or they refuse to pass these claims. Now, what we did was, instead of making it a bureaucratic red tape process, we cut through all of it and we made sure that our postal workers who are there on the ground are the people who are passing the claim. And they were incentivized to pass more claims. So this ensured that no laborer who went through an accident would have to wait for his money to be given to him just because of bureaucratic red tapeism. That is the way how we ensured that even though our intent was noble, our impact was large scale. So every major policy has to have these mechanisms built in to ensure that anything that goes wrong, it can immediately be dealt with. Now, another important thing that comes out of all of this is a feedback mechanism, because obviously there are going to be spaces where things may not have worked in the best way possible. But is there a grievance redressal system that we've included in place to ensure that this is taken care of? For that, we ensured that there was a separate helpline that was kept in place where any grievant could lodge his complaint, and within 24 hours, he would have a response from the local office and his problem was solved. Now comes the last session of sorts, where freedom works, let it. Because every time that we reach for state power, we should also realize that most of humanity's greatest achievements were born not of governments, but of free individuals. JRD Tata brought in aviation to India. It was not the state. Vasco da Gama found the sea route to India. It was not the state. A lot of these times, the great work that we see that has been introduced was started by individuals working in their private capacity and then helped by the government. The best societies are not those with the smartest people, but they are those with the freest and the most empowered people. And I strongly believe that the role of the state is to protect freedom and not to replace it. So let me return to, as I began with chargers. Yes, it's frustrating when devices don't work together, but the solution isn't always a government mandate. Because sometimes, even with good intentions, we invite in a lot of complexity, inefficiency, and injustice. So let's ask deeper questions. What is the problem? Is there market failure? Can this be fixed without coercion? If the state must intervene, can it be designed to be accountable, adaptable, and impactful? And that is the heart of practical public policy. It's not slogans, it's not symbolism, it's not empty speeches, it's systems that deliver freedom, dignity, and prosperity. Now, before we end, this was not supposed to be in my speech today, but I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. And I feel if I don't share this idea with you, it would be injustice to the all of you as well. Uh, a very dear friend of mine, whose name is Raghav Krishna, he is a founder of a company called Bharat, who works in government policy spaces only. But there was something that he told me during our discussion. He used a sentence rather, where state as the enabler of Purusharth. Now, this statement in itself, stung a very deep thought in me, where everything that has happened in the past couple of years, it has redefined what an Indian state can be. It is not a cold bureaucracy, not a watchdog with camera on every corner, but it is something alive. There is something sacred, a partner in the human quest for meaning. Because if we often think of long, we've been stuck in a binary trap where the state either sets you free to chase your own dreams, the entire idea of sovereign individual of Western liberalism, or it binds you in change of control, the surveillance state of dystopian nightmares. But what if there is a third way, where with our ancient worldview, where our ancient roots, living pulse, which offers a vision where the state doesn't just govern, but it elevates, and I want to take you along with this just for a couple of minutes, as I dug into it while reading into this just before this session, from Vedas to the streets of modern India, where the entire idea of Purusharth in India is the fourfold path, that is Dharma, Arth, Kam, Moksha. But can this be something that is implemented into India's governance space, where no longer, there has to be ideas that are stuck to the Western philosophy and to the Western ideals? Because imagine a school where Dharma is the first class, where you would read through Mahabharata as a legend, but not as a legend, but as a crash course in tough choices. Yudhishthir gambling away his kingdom. What is the cost of reckless duty? Artha could mean studying sustainable farming, not just GDP charts. Because I would recommend that we look at Bhutan. It has a gross national happiness index. Why can't we have a gross national purpose index? With Kama, it could be teaching art, music, and theater, letting kids paint their dreams, not just ace math. And moksha means philosophy isn't a luxury, it's oxygen. Let students wrestle with Gita's do your duty and drop the fruit, or Buddha's middle path. Because I met somebody once who told me, we're teaching kids to count and not to feel. He had a point. Because if the state's job is Purusharth, educations will stop churning out cogs and start churning out shapers. And once we do this, what I started with the original idea of how public policy should work in India, where you need to have people understanding and asking questions instead of just coming out with good intent and empty ideas. So this is just some food for thought that I wanted to leave you with. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for having me. Jayan bhai?
Good evening, sir. Shah,
Good
sir,
evening.
thank you so much for a very, very insightful session. Really appreciable, good deliberations. Sir, now I think so. The AICT and UGC are on this track of Purusharth.
Right.
They are on that track, and that is why they have introduced universal human values, and which is covering all these things what you have said now. They are on that track. Hope so they succeed, and we all have to contribute in that, isn't it? If we don't contribute, who will do it? Our future generation, they have to be guided. We can take the horse to the water, isn't it? We can't make horse to drink it. But they are more on that AI and technology and all that. Even though ChatGPT is giving a fake citations and all that, you know. It is there. We know because daily we are facing all these things. And they will argue on that only. Okay, why it is like this, why it is like that. But now, if you are not prompting properly to Chat GPT, they will not give you proper answer, isn't it? So we have to
Absolutely.
focus on both the sides. Coin has got both the sides. We have to be on that track as well as with this Purusharth. I believe so. And AICT and UGC are simply tracking that. All the best. Thank you so much. God bless giving me opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I completely agree with you in that space. And like you said, it's two coins of the same side, but at the same time, I think both, not only us, like the government, but us also have to keep making that conscious choice. For example, when you spoke about AI and ChatGPT, yes, agreed. If you're prompting wrong, it's going to give you wrong answers, but it can also be used in the right way. And we saw that in Mahakumbh, where it was probably the largest world human gathering in the world, and we had AI enabled cameras to ensure that people who got lost were immediately located. We were able to keep track of people. We were able to maintain security, and this was done in a beautiful manner possible. And again, this was with the help of technology. So again, when I say, I don't mean that, when we chose Purushartha as a leader of state, we leave behind technology. It is about integrating the tech with our ancient knowledge to come up with something beautiful.
Yes, sir. Agree, 100%. God bless. Let's move ahead with all these things. Thoughts?
Next we can any question for participant? I can see one question in the chat box.
Yes.
So can we say replacing planning commission, introduction of Niti Aayog is reinventing the Purusharth role of state?
I would say it is partially there, because with the reinvention of Planning Commission as Niti Aayog, we suddenly had a lot of new ideas and a lot more efficient manner of working, where along with Niti Aayog, you also had the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister being formed, which is continuously working on these ideas. If you follow Sanjeev Sanyal sir on any of his platforms, I would say, he's coming out with articles daily, he's coming out with reports daily on how we can improve our governance systems, how we can improve our financial systems, how we're able to perform better. But I wouldn't say that just by doing that, you have completely agreed. Because again, when I say Purushartha, I mean it in a manner that, how do I put this in a better format for you? Okay, let me say this. A state rooted in dharma would not only fight corruption because it's illegal, because it's wrong according to Dharma Shastras demanding kings to be as pure as mirrors, Artha would mean jobs and roads for sure, but at the same time, it would mean protecting crafts like Banarasi silk or Madhubani art, wealth, but with roots. Kama would be funding the festivals, Diwali, Holi, Janmashtami, let people eat, laugh, and dance, where the only example that would come to mind in this space would be the Ram Mandir opening that had happened, where you had millions and millions of people on the roads celebrating in a very peaceful manner, and the government supporting it. Moksha would be building meditation halls, teaching yoga in schools, letting Ramayana and Mahabharata be taught in libraries. So I would say we're 50%, 25 to 50% there, where some of these things are already happening. But I wouldn't say we're completely there. We still have a long way to go.
Yes, thank you, sir. Sir, there is just one request and query as well. As you are also working with the government and you are a young fellow as well. So there are many students who are coming from the rural background and they are not well versed with the global language like English.
Right.
But they have a very good innovative idea. So then how can we assimilate those all students with the government? Can you give us some idea or the platform? However, Kalpesh sir has shared about the LAMP fellowship, but apart from
Right.
that, how can they access the government, especially in policy formulations as an intern or like that?
Right. See, a very simple and a very beautiful example of that would be legislative assistant training programs, where LAMP obviously is something that has been going on for a while. There are a couple of other fellowships that run. There is the Udan Fellowship, there is the Mukherjee Fellowship, but that is one side of things. What I am talking about is something that I practice in my office as a policy advisor to Dev Singh Chauhan. I practice it in our office over here, but it is something that I would believe that every single public representative should, where you should take on for every term, take on a group of 5 to 6 students and let them assist you in your work. Because when that happens, when every session you take on 5 or 6 people, you not only train them in the legislative process, but at the same time, you get to learn something different from them, because you never know where brilliant ideas are going to come from. It does not always require a formal education into the space. A lot of the times, simpler solutions come to people who haven't really overcomplicated themselves by going through these entire processes. So our office, every session, we have a team of 6 students who we onboard and we train them in this space. And if they want to continue with us, well and good. Otherwise, we wish them all the best, and they usually go on to do great things.
Thank you very much.
Uh,
So, Amit, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. On the behalf of Sambhav Initiative and Pro Bono India, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to our esteemed dignitary, Mr. Devan Shah, sir, for this wonderful session and also devoting their valuable time. Thank you, sir. And I would like to express my thanks to Dr. Kalpesh Gupta, sir, and Hiranshi, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to moderate today's session. Once again, thank you so much, sir, and to all the participants for joining us today. Looking forward to hosting you in by tomorrow's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you,
good day.
Devan sir. Session is really nice. Combination of theoretical and practical aspect. Really, we all enjoy a lot. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure
Yes.
being here. Thank you so much.
Participant, just for your knowledge, sir is right now in Delhi only. His parliament is going on.
Yes.
Yes.
But it was a pleasure talking to all of you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.